A new twist in the Spygate story that may soon go down in the history books as the biggest political scandal in American history. How do you like that? Vladimir Putin may have guessed how deep our deep state was. I mean, Edward Snowden, after all, was his buddy, right? Hiding out there in Russia. And Vladimir Putin would have wanted to expose that, the deep state, for his own political gain. So let's jump back to what we already know, okay? We know that Hillary Clinton's campaign paid its D.C. law firm, Perkins Coie, to funnel money to Fusion GPS, the so-called investigative firm, to dig up dirt in Russia on now President Donald Trump. We also know that Fusion GPS hired a former British spy named Christopher Steele. He had a specialty in Russia, and they paid him $168,000 to pen this now infamous dossier that our FBI later used as a reason to investigate the Trump campaign and spy on innocent Americans. Christopher Steele, the British spy, called up a whole bunch of his former intel friends over there in Russia to see what he could dig up, what he could find out, including some longtime former KGB folks and others that were quite close to Vladimir Putin. Talk about an open invitation to Russia. I mean, Putin, the political animal that he is, he was just handed one big, magnificent opportunity. Think about it. By the Clintons, by the way. If he really wanted to create division in the United States of America, this was certainly a good way to do it. And given the partisanship that already was running rampant in the U.S., Putin managed to achieve something that may have been beyond even his wildest ambitions. He thought Hillary Clinton and U.S. intelligence agencies might want to hear about Donald Trump. He was able to funnel it straight to them, all while simultaneously making sure that Americans, no matter how this election turned out, would eventually discover Donald Trump was set up by the so-called deep state, Fusion GPS, and the Clinton campaign. They opened our democracy right up to the direct disturbance from the Russians. It's like we were waving a big flag and saying, hey, come on, hey, Russians, come and get us. Thanks, guys. I mean, what better way, think about it, if you're Putin, to injure your opponent than by using the age-old method of divide and conquer, straight from the ancient Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War. Chapter 1, Section 23, here we go, on how to wound your enemy. He writes, quote, if his forces are united, separate them. And that's exactly what Putin and Russia have done. We are separated right now as a country. I mean, they're not entirely to blame. I would add that we're part of that. We've allowed that. The Democrats and the Republicans have become so divided and so political, and the mainstream media has enabled them to do all that, that sure, we are divided right now. Lucky for Putin. I mean, sources are telling me that the Russians have told the Maduro regime in Venezuela, hey, don't worry about the U.S. The U.S. can't do anything. The U.S. is so caught up in its Mueller mess. And they're partly right. We are divided. Although, hats off to the administration because they've taken on some major policy reforms despite all that chaos. If you ask me, Vladimir Putin wants us to know how deep our deep state is. The breadcrumbs, they're all there. And just in case you missed any, he highlighted them when speaking in Helsinki after being asked about the dossier. Remember this?
I believe that Russia is a democratic state, and I hope you're not denying this right to your own country. You're not denying that United States is a democracy. Do you believe United States is a democracy? And if so, if it is a democratic state, then the final conclusion in this kind of a dispute can only be delivered by a trial, by the court, not by the executive, by the law enforcement.
Okay, can you take a hint? I mean, Putin is basically challenging on us on what we consider a democracy. And he's advocating for a full discovery of what may have led to the dossier. Because, well, he knows that this will further divide us, and by further dividing us, he helps Russia on the international stage. But I would only say maybe when this is all said and done, the good news is it does get exposed. It has to be exposed. We deserve answers, and I'm afraid that those answers are not going to be very good, and they're going to be very disheartening, and they're going to be very difficult, and we're all going to be very, very upset because we put our trust in the system. We had faith that the FBI and the people working in the FBI would be doing the right thing. But then when you learn that there are FBI folks out there that will go to a judge and get a warrant to spy on an innocent American with a bunch of flimsy opposition research that was never checked, easy things to check, like Michael Cohen, did he go to Prague, did he not go to Prague? Why don't you check the immigration system, right? His passport, why not take a look? Why use opposition research to get a warrant to spy on an American? I mean, look, I think Putin's laughing all the way to the bank, as they say, so to speak. Joining me right now, former Trump 2016 campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. Good to see you, Corey. What bugs me the most is I think that Hillary Clinton and the DNC and the Democrats that were backing her and Perkins Coie, they basically, Fusion GPS, opened us up, exposed us to the Russians and the mess that we are in now.
Trish, it's amazing. Trish, it's amazing when you think about what really transpired. The Clinton campaign took $5 million of campaign money. Individuals who gave that money to support Hillary Clinton, they took $5 million and gave it to the law firm so they could go create this false dossier. Just that in and of itself is probably a campaign finance violation. But when you look at what transpired next, Christopher Steele, we now know, went to the State Department and had a meeting with Victoria Nuland and her assistant, where contemporaneous notes were then transcribed and sent to the FBI that said, Christopher Steele is not a credible source. He is giving us information which we know to be unfactual, such as go to the embassy in Miami, go to the consulate in Miami, which we know doesn't even exist. And then the FBI didn't do a simple Google search on this. Use that false dossier that Christopher Steele said had to get out before Election Day. So now we know it's political. They use that false dossier to go and get a warrant 10 days later to start to spy on members of the Trump campaign. That is a crime.
Some Democrats are saying all Attorney General Barr wants to do is tear apart the FBI. That's his goal. To which I would say, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this yet, it is going to kind of tear apart the FBI, and it is going to basically cause every single American to think twice about the FBI. However, this is not Attorney General Bill Barr's fault. May I remind you, this is the FBI's fault. This is James Comey's fault. This is the people that contributed to this poor discovery process in the first place, isn't it, Corey?
Trish, it's Police Week here in Washington, D.C. The president was at the police memorial just today, reminding us of the sacrifices that men and women who wear the badge make for this country every day and every year. And most of the people at the FBI are great Americans. They are the premier law enforcement agency in our country, if not the world. But the top echelon abuse their powers. Jim Comey, Andy McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, James Baker. They were the cabal that tried to first stop Donald Trump from getting elected and then tried to have him removed from office. And if that is not a crime, I don't care if you wear a badge or not, you're accountable to the people of this country. Justice is blind, which means you pay for those crimes. And I believe that when Inspector General Horowitz's report comes out in about a month, the middle of June, there will be criminal referrals for 4 or 5 high-ranking former FBI individuals who are going to have to stand before a jury of their peers and tell America why they decided to spy on us on domestic soil because they didn't like our politics.
You know what's really troubling to me about this? I mean, I look at it, and by the way, I said this last night, and I'm going to say it again. I don't care if you hate Donald Trump, more than anyone in the world. I don't care if you love him. I don't care if you're left, right, center. This is something, Corey, that people should care about, this issue that the FBI thinks it's somehow able to go around, and these, as you point out, top people at the FBI, and work on a different level. That is truly disturbing. It's so unethical, and I'm a little saddened by it. I'm going to just say that. I mean, I find it really disturbing to think that people would stoop to these kinds of levels to somehow undo the will of the American people, which was to elect Donald Trump.
Trish, you would think that when you get to be the director of the FBI, the deputy director of the FBI, you know, you take your personal biases, you put them aside, and you do what's right because you're serving the American people in those capacities. And look, they abuse their badges, they abuse their guns, they abuse the privileges that we have to the FISA court when we want to go and do surveillance on individuals who we think are terrorists or operating illicitly in our country. That's what the FISA court is there for. It's not to spy on Americans because we don't like their politics or we don't want them to win. And that's what they've done here. And this not only should have never happened to Donald Trump, this should never happen to anyone. And if this would have happened to Barack Obama because someone from the Bush administration authorized it, those people would be called treasonous and they'd be in jail for the rest of their lives.
And I'd be just as angry, Corey. This is not about politics. This is about what's right and what's wrong and what our country's about.
Too many people go to work every day to put their lives on the line, the men and women of law enforcement, to do right by the American people. And this small, select group of people abuse that right, abuse their privileges, and the FBI will suffer a long time because of this disgusting display of overzealous government bureaucrats who thought that they could be smarter and better than the 60 million Americans that voted for Donald Trump.
It's got to be exposed. It does. Corey Lewandowski, thank you, sir, as always. Good to see you tonight. All right.